Today, the subcommittee will convene for an open oversight hearing to receive testimony regarding the Department of Defense from the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Mr. Secretary, General Kane, congratulations to you both on your new roles and welcome to your first hearing before the subcommittee. We look forward to working with you closely to provide for our common defense. And a very special welcome to Mrs. Bryn McDonnell. Bryn, it's great to have you back here in this room. You sat beside me on this side of the dais, so it might be a new feeling sitting where you are now. So I'm sure it's a bittersweet that you're no longer serving as a dependent member of my staff, but I commend your service to the nation. And Mr. Secretary, you're lucky to have her. I have no doubt that she'll provide you with the same level of faithful advice that she provided for me. The work we do in this committee has never been more important. We are navigating an increasingly complex and uncertain global environment, with adversaries like China and Russia pursuing aggressive actions and challenges in regions like the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, and beyond. Our military must be prepared to meet those challenges, and that preparation requires substantial investments in both personnel and equipment. But we also must be responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollars. Balancing national security priorities with fiscal responsibility is a delicate but necessary task. Mr. Secretary, I commend you for quickly hitting the ground running and focusing on your key priorities of reviving the warrior ethos, building our military, reestablishing deterrence, and ensuring the defense of our homeland. The American people expect their borders to be secure. The challenges of our southern border, including the ongoing flow of illegal drugs, human trafficking, and other illicit activities, are growing threats to our security and must be addressed. The cartels exploiting our border and increasingly sophisticated and dangerous. The Department of Defense has a critical role in this fight. Mr. Secretary, I applaud your efforts in focusing resources to ensure the border is secured. I look forward to more discussion about what resources are necessary to keep the momentum going without compromising our ability to meet threats abroad. I also want to hear from you both about the readiness of our force. I have heard from senior military leaders and service members alike about the ongoing concerns related to the health of our force, including the need for modernization, the ability to respond quickly to emerging threats. While this committee has consistently provided funding for investments in next-generation systems, from hypersonics to autonomous platforms, we're still seeing troubling delays and cost overruns in a number of programs. We simply cannot deter near-peer competitors like China by falling short in sustaining our defense and industrial base. That is why it's critical that we continue to focus on the pace of modernization, particularly in areas like air superiority and munitions production. The committee has been steadfast in our support of entities within the department that challenges the status quo, such as DIU, the Office of Strategic Capital, and APFIT. These innovation entities are alternative pathways to deliver capability quickly to the warfighter, and I would appreciate the opportunity to work with you to bolster these activities as a way to bring disruption and competition into the department, which, in my experience, can yield better and faster results. I also want to discuss the critical importance of our partnerships and alliances. The AUKUS agreement is one of the most significant defense initiatives in recent years, with the potential to reshape the strategic landscape in the Indo-Pacific. As we pursue these initiatives, we must ensure that we are maintaining our own military capability. Our shipbuilding programs remain over budget and behind schedule and under-delivered. This is simply not acceptable, and we need to have credible, executable naval force structure plan to keep pace with threats that we face, particularly from China, while ensuring taxpayer accountability. Finally, we must always remember the men and women who wear the uniform. Far too long, we heard from too many junior enlisted service members who were struggling with basic needs. These men and women, the backbone of our armed forces, they perform the tough and often dangerous work that keeps our country safe. I was proud to help secure a 10% raise for our junior enlisted service members on top of the 4.5% raise that all service members received last year. It's critical that we continue to provide support for all those who fight in defense of our great nation. We ask a lot of our military, and the strategic landscape is more complex than ever. I look forward to a frank discussion on how we are matching resources to priorities and honoring our commitments to both readiness and to our people. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Ms. McCollum, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of you for appearing here today. And I'd like to thank all the men and women who serve in our military, both wearing the uniform and as civilians. As I say often, national security is holistic and not just defense spending. Do Americans have the health care that they need? Are we providing good nutrition to our kids so that they can eventually grow up strong and serve in our armed forces? Cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and the reconciliation bill put the whole of our society at risk, and I believe that this weakens our national security. Also, billionaires can have their tax breaks. It's also irresponsible for us to assume that you can fund the defense programs through an unstable reconciliation process. That's why it's never happened before in our nation's history. What else has never happened before was the Departments of Defense operating under a full-year continuing resolution. The CR was endorsed by President Trump, OMB Director Voigt, and you, Mr. Secretary. After enactment of the CR, the department had 45 days to submit a spend plan to Congress. In many cases, it ignored congressional intent. OMB has an obligation to get money to the services so that contracts can be executed in a timely fashion. But every defense company, from the smallest startup to the largest prime, has told me it is going too slow. Time and taxpayers' dollars are being wasted. Our national security is being put at risk because of the lag time. CRs are simply wasteful. But the point of this hearing is the President's fiscal 2026 budget request, and we don't have it. It was due in February. Today is June 10th. 4 months from now is the end of the fiscal year, and all we have is a very rough draft. The DoD has failed to submit a complete request. So today we are forced to mark up at a rushed and, for me, an incomplete Defense Appropriations Act. I don't blame Chairman Cole or Chairman Calvert. The fault is squarely on the administration. But just like the CR, this has national security ramifications. We do not have the critical information, the granular details on the DoD programs that we need to make in order to be effective and efficient with our decisions. The President proposes, Congress disposes, and that's how our government works. How can I work with this administration in good faith when we don't have a full blueprint of the President's priorities? For example, Golden Dome at this point is merely a concept. It's not a plan. None of us have been briefed yet on how you intend to spend $175 billion or deliver this program in 3 short years. We do not know if priorities like Golden Dome, if they do not survive the reconciliation process, what will the department do? You can't come back to this committee and ask us to fill those gaps. Defense spending should never have been included in reconciliation. Mr. Secretary, it's still incumbent upon you to provide us with the real budget request. That's the only way to finish a full-year bill that will address DoD's complex issues, like delays to the Virginia and Columbia-class submarine programs, the skyrocketing cost of the Sentinel program, ensuring our F-35 fighters are operational, and taking care of the quality of life issues for our service members and their families that they deserve. We also must understand the administration's approach to geopolitical concerns, like Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, or plans to address the military capabilities of the People's Republic of China, or adequately support our future military posture in the Arctic as the polar ice cap continues to melt. We don't know the answers because the administration has not submitted a budget. Mr. Secretary, let me close with this. There's no secret that we have some serious disagreements. The President's decision to call the National Guard troops to Los Angeles was premature, and the decision to deploy active duty Marines as well is downright escalatory. Active duty military has absolutely no role in domestic law enforcement, and they are not trained for those missions. I ask you, Mr. Secretary, and I ask the President, follow the law. I was also appalled by your decision to fire Chairman Brown, Admiral Franchetti, and other military leaders who served our nation with distinction. You fire them without giving a single reason why. Many Americans, myself included, have witnessed what is a deliberate effort to silence and diminish the achievements of minorities and women in the military. Their dedication, their heroism, their sacrifice on behalf of our nation deserve recognition, not erasure. As a former history teacher, I know and acknowledge uncomfortable truths about our own history. It is the only way, when we recognize them, that we move forward together. Since World War II, the department has made great strides in building a military that is more reflective of the population of this nation. That should be celebrated. It should not be reversed. That's how we build a more perfect union. We build it together. But Mr. Secretary, today I have a job to do. We must provide the resources necessary to make sure our men and women in uniform can accomplish their missions and come home safely. And on that, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you and I both agree. To do that, we need a budget from you as soon as possible, a complete budget. I look forward to your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the courtesy, and I yield back.
Thank you. And before we hear from Witness, I'd like to recognize the distinguished chairman of the full committee, my good friend, Chairman Tom Cole, for any statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCullum, and always good to be here with my good friend and negotiating partner, the Ranking Member of the full committee, Ms. Delora. Welcome, Secretary Hegseth and General Crane, and we thank you for your service to our great nation. As today marks your first appearance before this subcommittee, I want to reaffirm my commitment to work with you and work to ensure that we have a strong defense. We convene at a time of significant global uncertainty. The threats facing America are diverse and evolving and demand a strong, agile, and effectively funded Department of Defense. As Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, my primary responsibility is to ensure that taxpayer dollars are allocated wisely and effectively to safeguard our security. First, I want to address the readiness of our armed forces. We must ensure that our troops are fully equipped, trained, and prepared to meet any challenge. I'm particularly interested in the current state of our defense industrial base and the steps being taken to address any identified shortfalls in being able to meet production demands. Next, I want to address the modernization of our military capabilities. It takes us too long to acquire new weapon systems. Meanwhile, our adversaries are rapidly developing advanced technologies. We must not surrender our technological edge or allow our forces to be under-equipped and outgunned. I'd like to hear about your plans for Golden Dome, hypersonics, and other programs that are evolving with the constantly changing nature of war. It's imperative that we invest in technologies that will define the future fight. At the same time, we must remain realistic about development timelines and avoid overcommitting to a single approach at the expense of adaptability. It's important that this subcommittee understands how trade-offs and risks were approached in this budget. I've been concerned about capability gaps during transitions from one platform to the next, and while space is the next frontier, I'm hearing more and more that space offers an answer to every problem. While I'm optimistic about space-based capabilities, I certainly think platforms like the E-7 offer tremendous capabilities until, and frankly beyond, when space is fully online. We need diversified capability and support for programs across domains to ensure continued military dominance. I also want to hear more about the Department's efforts to produce a budget that balances maintaining a strong defense posture with exercising fiscal responsibility. I'll be seeking assurances that the Department's maximizing efficiency and eliminating wasteful spending. And Mr. Secretary, I look forward to hearing more about what you've done with the efforts undertaken so far. I must say, I do agree with my friend, Ms. McCullum. We need more information than we've gotten from OMB. That's not your responsibility, but it's critical for us to be able to make the decisions we're going to have to make. And again, I understand all the complexities of being a new administration. Nobody ever meets the timeline when they first come into office. And we've gotten a lot of good information from OMB, but the reality is we frankly need more than we've received so far to make the decisions that we're called upon to make. I want to emphasize the importance of congressional oversight, and again, I'm committed to working with the Department of Defense to ensure that our national security objectives are met. However, we also have a duty to hold it accountable for its spending and performance. And I think I can speak for almost everyone in this room. No one liked the way the fiscal year 2025 process ended. Again, that's not your fault, that's our fault. And there's plenty of blame to go around, but it's certainly an experience I don't want to repeat. I don't want you or your colleagues at the Department of Defense to have to operate under a CR again for the coming year. I know the difficulties that places on you. Every member of this committee knows that. You've got my commitment. We're going to work hard to avoid that this year. But again, we need some help from all concerned in the process to achieve that goal. And almost no one, again, as I said, liked the way the process ended, but we owe it to the men and women in uniform to get this right. It'll require collaboration with the department to inform and produce a product that will meet that goal. I look forward to being your partner in that effort. And again, I want to thank you for being here today. And again, I want to thank you for your extraordinary service to this country before you assumed this position. I think that's one of the reasons why we've done as well recruiting, is people that are thinking about putting on the uniform of the United States have confidence in you because you've made that decision and you served this country with distinction before you ever came on this post. And leading by example is an important thing, and I want to thank you for the example you set for men and women to wear the uniform of the United States. With that, again, welcome in your first appearance, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to now turn to the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, for any opening comments.
Thank you so much, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCollum, and always to, again, my dear friend, the chairman of the committee. We've worked together for many years in producing, I believe, bipartisan appropriations bills, and it's our attempt to be able to do that this go-round as well. Thank you for holding this oversight hearing on President Trump's Department of Defense. To our witnesses, Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kane, Ms. McDonnell, welcome to the House of Representatives, and thank you for appearing before us today. Defense is the largest portion of our discretionary budget, yet you have still not sent this committee a complete budget request. We are in mid-June, Mr. Secretary. We are marking up a defense funding bill in a few hours, and yet we have no idea what your department actually needs. We have no details as to how you want to implement your plans. We should be discussing how you plan to get our submarine programs in order, how the Black Hawk platform will be utilized into the future, and how you plan to improve our service members and their families' quality of life. It is unacceptable for us to move forward with a defense funding bill without this information, and it is regrettable that the administration has put us in this position. If we cannot complete this process on time, we risk yet another continuing resolution, which is wasteful, inefficient, and detrimental to our military readiness. Already, your methods for funding our nation's defense programs are as unwise as they are unprecedented. You backed the first full-year continuing resolution for the Department of Defense. Particularly, defense has always been opposed to moving in that direction because of the uncertainty that a continuing resolution portends for defense and for the defense in reconciliation process instead of regular appropriations to fund vital programs. The appropriations process is wherein lies the power of the purse, according to the U.S. Constitution. However, this is still an essential opportunity for oversight, and the Department of Defense under your leadership is in desperate need of it. Your tenure as Secretary has been marked by endless chaos. Your first day in office, the Inspector General, whose job is to investigate waste, fraud, and abuse, was fired. Weeks later, you dismissed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and 5 other admirals and generals. Your careless sharing of military secrets in a non-secure signal chat, which could have placed American airmen in danger, led to the firing of former National Security Advisor Waltz. You have directly fired several of your top advisors, and the ranks of civilian staff have been decimated within key agency posts, including the Defense Health Agency and the Missile Defense Agency. Mr. Secretary, of all the cabinet departments, stability at the Department of Defense is the most critical for Americans' safety and security. Going after waste in defense and an audit among contractors long overdue, as is a fresh look at defense after what we learned in Ukraine. But that requires thoughtfulness and cooperation, not rash and reckless purges of leadership and rank-and-file staff. And firings based on political loyalty are an affront to what our Constitution and our military stands for and depends on. Meanwhile, this administration has done seemingly everything possible to alienate America on the world stage and turn our back on our allies, particularly Ukraine. Our belligerent trade wars and the dismantling of our humanitarian mission all have implications for our national security. Why would anyone trust us or partner with us when we are busy undermining our allies' economies and encouraging China to fill the vacuum we are leaving by abandoning our humanitarian mission? The bags of flour that I've seen on foreign soil that say U.S. AID, U.S. product of the United States of America will be gone, and instead will be replaced by China or Russia or Iran. Conflicts around the world that President Trump promised he would resolve overnight are only escalating. While we need to focus and prepare for threats to freedom and democracy worldwide, the Department of Defense is mired in controversy and chaos. The American people expect, deserve, and demand better from their military leadership, and the lawlessness across the government must end. This administration has unlawfully dismantled agencies and stolen funding across the government to give billionaires a tax break. America's future soldiers are learning in our public schools. Our future sailors might rely on Medicaid to see a doctor. Our future airmen and women might only have a meal to eat because of SNAP or food stamps, or they may live in subsidized housing. If tomorrow's service members are worried today about having their most basic needs met, then they are being held back from their fullest potential, and that weakens our national security. National security is not just machines and munitions. It requires a whole-of-government approach, which is why this administration must provide us an acceptable and complete budget as soon as possible so we can conduct proper oversight, and why this administration must cease the lawless stealing of appropriated funds. I thank the chair and ranking member, and I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. We'll now begin with witness testimony. Gentlemen, without objection, your full written testimony will be placed in the record. Secretary Hegseth, we can start with you for your summary of your remarks. Secretary, you recognize.
Well, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who is performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. I'm also proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. Today, as they do every day, they are keeping America safe. They're defending the homeland, they're standing up and deterring communist China, and we're working hand in glove with allies and partners to achieve peace through strength. I'd actually like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that will improve quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, I've directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in improving the living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moving, and improving the quality of care provided by the defense healthcare system. Now, the best part of my job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. I hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face those challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback that I've received from the force, and I'll keep listening and looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, over $1 trillion for national security, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. In the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. We've found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department, and we have reinvested those savings. We've killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. We are re-optimizing the civilian workforce and repositioning resources to better support our warfighters. We're working with the Department of Homeland Security to increase border security. We've reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We've defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to achieve peace through strength. To carry out the President's mission, we have 3 core priorities, as was mentioned: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we're restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump has charged me with focusing on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness. That's exactly what we're doing. We're focused on what's important: warfighting and warriors. We're sweeping away distractions and bloated bureaucracy. We've set standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. Our force is responding positively, incredibly, to these changes. And thanks to President Trump, recruiting and retention is higher than it's been in decades at historic numbers. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. Second, we're rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged, yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump is correcting those mistakes. We're reviving the defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, rapidly fielding emerging technologies to put the best weapons in the hands of our warfighters. This includes investment of $25 billion in the Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. This budget will revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, $47 billion in shipbuilding total. The budget increases significantly funding for autonomous systems, long-range fires, drones, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our warfighters. Third, we're reestablishing deterrence. When our opponent sees our well-equipped, tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test American resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home, and it starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of the southern border, with crossings already dropped 99.9%. It also starts in our neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere. As you know, as we've said, the Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled twice to the Indo-Pacific region to meet with our allies and partners, and they have responded. As we shift in that direction, President Trump looks to those allies and partners to step up, to share in the burden of their own defense. He also sees them, as I do, as force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress in that. As the President has rightly pointed out, it's only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. So the Department of Defense is executing a common sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious, and so must our investments be. So what this budget does, it matches capabilities to threats. We must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and we must act fast. This committee is our critical partner in everything we do, and your leadership and oversight is essential. So we look forward to accomplishing these goals, to achieving peace through strength, to supporting our warriors, protecting our citizens and taxpayers together with you. May God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Kane, you're now recognized for your remarks.
Thank you, Chair Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, other leaders, members of the committee. I'm honored here today to join Secretary Hegseth and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you today to testify on the President's fiscal year 2026 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability, and lethality to our taxpayers' investments, ensuring that every expenditure increases the survivability of our joint force, providing our warfighters with the advanced capabilities and capacity and cutting-edge technologies required to dominate our adversaries. I have deep gratitude for everyone in this room and your commitment and cooperation to help us deliver the capability and capacity for our 2.8 million members of our joint force, the civilians that serve alongside us, and of course, their families, all required to work together to deliver, as the Secretary said, peace through strength. It is my responsibility as chairman to understand the global set of conditions, advise the Secretary, and integrate our joint forces to confront and manage risks worldwide. This demands a comprehensive understanding of all domains: space, cyber, air, sea, undersea, all military services, each region, and at times our allies, partners, of course, as we consider carefully what they bring to the table, and to inform the decisions that you'll make to give us the finite taxpayer dollars required to ensure the greatest strategic impact with that investment. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation against adversaries seeking to do us harm. We are relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to deter our adversaries at every opportunity, while ensuring we're positioned to win on the battlefields of the future when called upon. This budget empowers the joint force to get after Secretary Hegseth's 3 pillars, as he mentioned: restoring warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing deterrence, and ensures, from my perspective, the joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready. The President's budget invests in our warfighters. To win on the battlefields of future, as I said, our forces must be properly armed with the right capabilities: lethal, modern, reliable, survivable, and at scale. Victory requires people and platforms that will overmatch the enemy day after day. Systems that will be required to operate under the harshest of conditions, and technologies that will give our warfighters the decisive edge that they deserve. This budget gives us the necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible talent, and we need to get every bit of it moving in the same direction. This budget also helps the joint force get globally integrated. I think we're relationship entrepreneurs within the joint force, which requires us to work together with the military, our allies and partners, industry, and of course the interagency to be connected before crisis begins. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always on the account, anticipating the next fight, not fighting the last fight, and delivering for our force and their families. Our force and our families are the last and most important part of this budget. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving quality of life, housing, medical care, and the moving process. Along with our most precious asset, our people must be properly armed, integrated, and ready. I also want to highlight the service member over my right shoulder quickly, the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, who will retire after 37 years, Sergeant Major Troy Black. He didn't know I was going to say this today. So in conclusion, it's an honor every day to serve alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, and families that our nation has ever known. I assure this committee that the joint force remains committed and capable and ready to defend our nation. With your continued support and prudent investment, we'll maintain that competitive edge at scale. I want to also remember today our deployed and their families who are out there on the front edge of our nation, making sure that we're safe here in this committee room today. And I would be remiss, as I always try to remember our fallen and their families who've made the ultimate sacrifice. I thank the Congress for your support and collaboration. I thank this committee for your efforts and leadership, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I want to make sure that each member has a chance to ask questions, so everybody will have 5 minutes for the remarks and answers. Remember, when the little light comes on and it's yellow, you got 1 minute left. So I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Secretary, the department recently issued a memo reducing the civilian personnel at the Office of Director of Operational Test and Evaluation by about 74% and reduced the budget by 80%. Now, everyone on this subcommittee can attest that I've been beating the drum for reductions in DoD personnel, civilian personnel, since I became a member of the committee, and that's a long time. In fact, I have a bill that would require the department to reduce civilian staff by 15% based on merit. However, I think we need to be intentional and clear-eyed about the functions that we reduce. As you know, DOT&E was established by Congress in '83 to centralize and strengthen operational testing, ensure that weapon systems are rigorously evaluated for combat effectiveness, suitability, and to address deficiencies in oversight and standardization within the Department of Defense. And there's a lot of examples of DT&E catching flaws that would have catastrophic consequences for our military, including loss of life. One example is the M2, M3 Bradley, which was designed to transport troops, provides fire support. The Army approved a system touting the armor, firepower, and mobility. However, when the independent testing was done, it was found out the aluminum armor was not a good idea and was susceptible to failure. And early versions caught fire and burned. And so obviously we made changes and rectified that, and the Bradley's been a valuable part of our military ever since. But we share the same goals to create a more efficient, leaner DoD, but with things like Golden Dome coming along, we want to make sure that the technologies we pick are going to work and that we fund them accordingly. So I understand the reduction is seeking to remove duplicative functions. We're not interested in delays, and I know that that's really high on your list. However, a layer of independent testing is, I think, important. In light of that, with the reduction, how will you ensure that the military services tasked with testing and evaluating their own programs will not revert to past behavior which showed they would approve systems in order to meet operational needs or budget timelines? So with that, Mr. Secretary, see if we can have an answer to that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. And how we evaluated DOT&E was a reflection of the overall approach we take in the department, which is how efficiently do we operate? Where are the bottlenecks? We talk about the things you talk about every single day. How do we get how do we get systems, platforms, future capabilities in the hands of warfighters as quickly as possible? And so a review led by myself, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, our friends at DOJ who've worked with us have helped us look and identify places where we might find efficiencies. Now, I work, and my hands are directly in the middle of that, to ensure that as we seek those efficiencies and reduce those redundancies, we're not doing so in a way that undermines our capabilities or safety for warfighters in the future. DOT&E, after we got rid of a lot of the really low-hanging fruit of tens of billions of contracts and things that we've reduced, that were duplicative, that were completely wasteful, that were creating PowerPoint presentations that no one was looking at, you start to look at things like DOT&E, testing and evaluation, which in a headline sounds quite significant, and it can be in many ways. But when you ask the services, you ask the joint staff, you talk to the comptroller and CAPE, and you go across the other undersecretaries, there's a universal recognition that DOT&E's mission has bloated and expanded well beyond the scope of what it was supposed to be. And as a result, was expanding by months, and sometimes even more than that, the amount of time it was taking for systems to actually make it in the hands of warfighters. So you still have services in other places doing that testing and evaluation. This remains in place at a right size. So we see it as a right sizing of DOT&E. So it still provides that oversight and ensures across the joint force we're recognizing the challenges, but it doesn't add unnecessary time. So we recognize why it was created. We want it to do its job, but not more than its job. And that's what we believe it's doing by reforming it.
Well, thank you for that answer. Obviously, as we expect new systems, new technologies to come online quickly, we want to make sure, as this committee, that we're funding it properly and to make sure that you can handle the volume in which that you're anticipating, especially with a new technology like Golden Dome, which, you know, we still, as the ranking member pointed out, we still haven't seen a clear definition of what it is and what it's a strategic theater system, lower 48, Hawaii, Alaska, the rest of it, and how these layered systems are going to be put out there to defend the country and to make sure that we're not spending a lot of money unnecessarily. So testing and evaluation is going to be an important part of that. With that, I recognize Ms. McCullum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, I plan to ask you some budget questions about the following: the cost of the Qatar plane, where the money from the Army's parade is coming from, or the National Guard deployments to the border, where that funding is coming from. I honor and celebrate the United States Army, but I'd like to know how much this parade is going to cost. I have sent the department letters on several occasions on this, and I'm still waiting for a response. But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed. And that is the President's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we need the citizens of Minnesota request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard, who have worked on crowd control, they were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV, but this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief of Police to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles is absent a clear coordination, presents a significant logistical operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city," the end of his quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions, though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California, and how is it going to affect this budget, or the budget we're currently serving under? How much are these deployments going to cost for both the Marines and the National Guard? And what training or duties are not taking place because of these deployments? Where in your limited budget, sir, are you going to find, in the remainder of this fiscal year, are you going to pull the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or
Chairman,
Los
I have
Angeles.
limited time. I asked a budget
And they are
question.
being-
Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe
asked about the
ICE
budget.
agents should be
I
allowed to be
asked about the
safe in
budget,
doing
sir.
their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LAPD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have
Chairman,
implemented.
If
The police
if-
chief
if,
said
Mr.
she was
Chairman, if
overwhelmed,
the Secretary's not
so we
going to
helped.
ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important. What training missions aren't happening? Where are you pulling the money from? And how are you planning this in the moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time and I will yield it back to the
Mr.
chairman.
Secretary, I want to just let us know what accounts you're pulling the money to fund.
Thankfully, unlike the previous administration, we've got a 13% increase in our defense budget, and we will have the capability to cover down on contingencies,
Mr.
which is something the
Chairman,
National Guard and the Marine
take back
plan
my
for.
time.
So we have the funding to cover down on contingencies, especially ones as important as maintaining law and order in a major American city. As far as training, all of the units on the ground have been fully trained in their capabilities of what they're executing on the ground.
Chairman, ask for budgetary, if he needs to get back to the committee with the numbers, I'd appreciate it, both current and present.
Happy to
Thank
submit
you.
them for the record.
Gentlemen will receive an answer to the question for the record. Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, again, welcome. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I'm very concerned about retiring legacy systems. They need to be retired, no problem there, but doing it too fast and not having replacements coming online. I've got a particular concern where E3s, as my colleagues know, AWACS, there's 31 of them in the fleet, or there were. 15 have been retired since 23. They fly out of Tinker Air Force Base for the most part, which is in my district, hence my parochial, but I think legitimate interest here. Very interested in seeing, and this committee's done some important work in positioning us to acquire and field E7s. It's not a new technology. Our friends in Australia use it. Our friends in the United Kingdom use it. It's much superior to what we have. And so, again, this is one of the areas where we're concerned where we don't have the budget information from OMB we'd like. So I'm curious about what your thoughts are on the platform and replacing them. Do you have any idea about the speed and costs that you're planning to move in that particular area going forward?
Well, I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. And priorities and decisions are what we're in the business of on the budget side, on the capabilities side. And I think President Trump has charged us with making the big, difficult decisions after a lot of deferred maintenance and deferred decisions to ignore parochial priorities in large part and focus on what the department needs and where it needs it and when it needs it. And that means some tough calls. And there are platforms we've supported as a result, and there's some platforms and systems that we won't support going forward because the services have requested it, or we've identified those are systems and platforms that don't orient toward a future threat. I mean, we've learned a lot from what's happened in Ukraine. We've learned a lot from what China is attempting to do and the systems they're building. So if we have systems and platforms that are not survivable in the modern battlefield, or they don't give us an advantage in a future fight, we have to make the tough decisions right now. That's my job, that's the chairman's job, and it's our job to fund those new systems and make tough calls. So the E7 is an example of that. We're going to fund existing platforms that are there more robustly and make sure they're modernized. But we believe most of the ISR, or a great deal of the ISR in the future, will be space-based, and not in a scientific space-based we hope we'll get there, but in we're funding capabilities that will surpass some of those airborne capabilities. So we're willing to continue to review things like the E7, but from our view, investments in existing systems that carry forward that capability alongside even bigger investments in space-based ISR gives us the kind of advantages we need on a future battlefield. I think it's a
I
good
think
example.
that's a fair point. I would point out, I've been on this committee a long time. I watched the U.S. Army waste $29 billion on the future combat system because it was going to be so great. And it didn't, and we wasted a ton of money. We got a platform here that works. Space is great. It's unknown, it's undeveloped, and I would just urge you to look at this pretty carefully as you make the decision. We certainly will as a committee. I don't know how much time I've got left because the clock's not running.
You're the chairman, so.
Well, well, I will try and be respectful to the committee and certainly respectful to our witnesses. I have one other quick question, if I may, and I think probably a lot of members have had these concerns. Look, I'm largely very much in favor of the hiring freezes and some of the things you've done personnel-wise. So this is not a criticism, but I do hear that we have certain exempt positions, like aircraft mechanics, like firefighters. We're having a problem with that. Again, Fort Sill, I got the home of the field artillery and air defense artillery as well. It's a pretty military district. Nobody's being critical, but we're having a hard time getting, these are exempt categories, those filled. Can you sort of tell me where we're at on that? Because these are mission critical people.
It's a great question, sir. It's something we're paying very close attention to. In fact, we meet on it multiple times a week. It includes shipbuilding capabilities, childcare centers. There are a lot of positions that affect our industrial base, our capabilities, or our families that we are working diligently to ensure we're getting those exceptions as quickly as possible, those waivers. But we're also trying to do right by right-sizing the civilian force, which has gotten too bloated too fast and has mostly been right-sized through voluntary separations through DRP. So I acknowledge that, and we can get you a full list of the exemptions as well to make sure you understand where we're making trade-offs.
I'd appreciate that very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back. Thanks for your courtesy.
Thanks. Gentlemen, Mr. Lauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus, Mr. Secretary, my question on submarines and our national security, our military shipbuilding, and as I said specifically, submarines, critical investment for national security and for the economy of my home state of Connecticut. This is a yes or no question, Mr. Secretary. Do you agree that continued investment in the Department of Defense in submarine production is in fact critical to the United States national security and military readiness?
Very critical.
Okay, so yes, thank you, and we agree. They'll continue to be a critical asset to deter adversaries, sustain the advantage we have in undersea domain, and the Defense Department should continue to support these programs. What is the status of the Department's investments in submarine programs?
14% increase in FY26 on the Columbia, and a substantial increase in the Virginia as well. So we're ensuring a submarine industrial base that has been left behind, that has been neglected, is fully invested
we
to
have
make sure
funded
we're
the
speeding
submarine
up on
base
funding
here.
the submarines.
More than half, and you can go back to last December, but I want to move on. Do you know where our submarine production currently stands, and whether current production is sufficient to bridge the gap between current fleet size and projected need?
There is a gap, but we believe we are closing it, ma'am. Yes.
And if you can get to us the information about how, in fact, that you can close that gap, because we do not have any information or data that can substantiate what you're saying. Your department's initial budget proposal includes incremental funding for the Columbia-class submarine. Is that going to raise alarm bells across the defense industrial base by signaling a lack of commitment to the program?
No, we could not, ma'am, we could not be more committed to Columbia. The centrality in the triad, ensuring it delivers on time, it's central to the deterrent and the base of the United States. So
Do
we are
you know
very
how much
committed
of a
to that.
financial hole this will create for the defense industrial base? Will there be a financial hole for the defense industrial base in 2026?
Certainly not based on our projections. There is not a hole. We're investing in Columbia robustly.
Okay, without numbers, it's my understanding the department is planning to move $3.1 billion for the Columbia class from 2026 and spread it over 2027 and 2028. This creates a serious problem for industry in the short term and hampers shipbuilders' ability to reach an adequate production rate. Have you been in contact with Electric Boat or with Huntington Ingalls about your plans?
Almost every day, our Deputy Secretary of Defense, alongside our Secretary of the Navy, are actively engaged with all of our shipbuilders and shipyards to make sure their needs not only are being met, but their shortfalls are being addressed so that we can close that gap in real time, which has existed.
So
for
that
quite
you
some
can really lay out for us the information which we would like to get, this committee needs to take a look at, because I know you believe that submarines are important, as I do, but getting the specific information about where we stand, what the production rate is, what gaps there may be. We're willing to listen to all of that because, in fact, in contrast to what your earlier statement was, we have, in fact, supported mightily the submarine industrial base from this committee. That's not been neglected. Do you have a plan for making the investments necessary to ramp up submarine production to the necessary elections? I would just tell you, as part of the December continuing resolution, Congress included $5.7 billion for the department to put on contract for 2 additional Block 4 and 1 Block 5 Virginia-class submarines. The Navy advised members that these funds were required to be placed on contract by February of 2025, yet the department did not put funding for the 2 additional Block 4 boats on contract until April 30th. So do we have a plan, do you have a plan for making the necessary investments to ramp up submarine production to the necessary levels? And what is that plan?
Ma'am, first of all, I want to thank this committee for the flexibility alongside FY25 and the continued
Well,
resolution.
I would hope
which
you
is
would
less-
thank this committee for the
a lot of
funding
flexibility
that it
provided
had
on the
made.
submarine
We
industrial
have made a
base, and we
serious
appreciate that.
investment. So your first statement is inaccurate. We have focused squarely on submarines, and we're now want to know where that is going and what your plan is for the continued advancements to meet production levels and make sure that that is an area that's covered for our national security.
Ma'am, I fully acknowledge the investment this committee has made in shipbuilding, and the challenge is our department under the previous administration squandered a lot of that by
Please,
not
I
investing
don't.
properly.
I want your plan. I've had difficulties with the prior administration, and I don't mind calling them out. What is your plan for the future? Can we get that in writing and on paper so that we know where you're going? Because we don't have anything today. We have zip, nada, and knowing where you're going. You can talk percentages, you can talk about whatever you want, but unless this committee sees dollars and cents and where you're going and what your plan is, then we may reconsider what you need to do to go forward. Give us the details.
Congresswoman, we have the details and we will provide
Well,
them
then
for
let's
you.
have them before and my hope is that we could get to it before we go to a markup within a few hours here today. I yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back her time. The Dean of the House, Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, gentlemen and lady. Let me ask you about the stunning success of the Ukrainian drones of last week. Are we seeing the ushering in of a new era of warfare? The use of drones from afar. After all, these drones were smuggled into Russia, hidden for a great span of time, and then activated from 2,500 miles away. Are we prepared, both defensively and offensively, Mr. Secretary?
I'll answer that and then maybe hand it to the chairman. I would say, sir, it was a daring and very effective operation that we were not aware of in advance and reflects significant advancements in drone warfare, which we are tracking in real time inside Ukraine and taking that feedback to help us better understand how we can better produce more lethal, attritable drones but also advance our counter-UAS systems so that we're not vulnerable to a threat and an attack like that. The chairman and I got together right after seeing that and saying, what more can we do to ensure we're prepared and our country's defensible against something like that? But I'll hand to the chairman.
Mr. Secretary, Congressman, thank you for the question. I think it goes to your more strategic question about is the way and nature that we're fighting our wars changing, sir? The answer is likely yes. Mass numbers of rounds moving back and forth with precision and autonomy are all things that are advancing in the technology trend exponentially. One of the things that I've talked with some of the leaders of this community and committee about are buying capabilities along the technology curve or ahead of it. And so I do think it was a bold move, and it represents a new and different way of fighting wars as we've seen over the past few years in that particular fight, sir.
What do we need to do to protect ourselves from a similar type raid by an adversary?
Well, sir, intelligence is critical. Human intelligence, signals intelligence, every aspect of how we get ahead, get to the left of a problem like that. And certainly our department in conjunction, interagency, are focused on that. But then it's rapidly fielding the commercially available technologies in some cases, but others proprietary, whether they're EW, whether they're microwave, whether they're kinetic, to defeat drones either individually or in swarms in multiple locations against, protecting our people, protecting our installations, protecting our critical infrastructure, protecting our bombers. And some of that speaks to Golden Dome and what we'll do there, but you also have the particulars of the immediate. Our forward deployed troops, are they properly covered by counter-UAS systems? Do we have the best systems forward deployed? And that's something we're looking at every single day. We live in a dynamic operating environment, and the chairman knows this, the deputy, our policy shop, we are focused on ensuring that this is front and center, considering how central this threat will be going forward.
Well, these are low-cost, high-tech weapons, if you will, and has been dominated by China. 90% of drones are produced by China, I'm told. What does that tell us about what we need to do here at home?
Well, sir, it's not just, first of all, making sure we're less reliant on Chinese technology in any part of the supply chain, which is something we can speak to because that's been an aggressive part of our effort at DOD. But also recognizing it's not just China. Of course, Iran invests substantially in drone capabilities. And then learning a lot from partners on our side, like the Ukrainians who have developed systems and fielding that quickly. So commercially available, attritable, that we can produce at home is important to us.
Congratulations to all three of you, and we wish you well. Yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman for the question. Real quickly, is it the press stories accurate that 40% of the long-range bombers from Russia were destroyed in that attack? Is that an accurate number?
So I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is, but I also know that I may not say that in open session. So I'll take that and get back to you through appropriate channels.
Thanks, gentlemen. Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome our guests. I come from a family of combat veterans going back a long time. And my comment is the use of certain words and what they imply. When I hear warrior ethos, and I hear it a lot from you, Mr. Secretary, I'm concerned. All the soldiers in our family, all of whom fought and received medals for their combat service, call themselves soldiers. Marines are trained to kill. In terms of domestic policing, our police and our National Guard at the state level, carefully used, but also our state police are used in civil enforcement, and they are good. I don't need any reply. I just am concerned about what those words you often utter actually do in people's minds and change the language we have used since the founding of this republic. So that is a concern of mine. I wanted to go to the General and Chairman, if I could. We've heard a lot this morning about Defense Industrial Base. And this is something I ran for office on a long time ago. We have not made significant progress as a country in this regard. And the places that made things, whether they were machine tools, whether it was composite materials, were left behind. It's one of the reasons for the division in our society. So I am very interested in knowing what specifically and in which accounts, and I hope you can get this back to us within a week and a half, you are going to focus on in order to inject additional resources in the defense industrial base of this country. What will that look like? We are just successful now in helping steel to revive and some of our composite metals. 40 years ago, I wrote a title to the defense bill dealing with strategic metals. Nobody at Department of Defense cared, okay? So I'm interested in which accounts, if you could kindly get back to me on that, and when you say defense industrial base, budget-wise, in which accounts, what does that mean? All right, I don't expect you to answer it now. Can you tell me when you might get that information back to us?
Well, ma'am,
As we
you just said a week and a half, so I know the awesome humans behind me are scribbling madly to come back to that. Can I just make a quick comment? You know, I happen to be a lucky guy that served in the private sector for a while, and I ran a machine shop in Texas along with a metal finishing business. So when we talk about defense industrial base, I broaden that out to really the national industrial base. There are certain components that are made in the defense side, but as you articulate, ma'am, many others are made in the small machine shops out around this entire nation. When I talk about mobilizing our nation, I think of that national, not just defense industrial base. What do we have to do to create greater capacity all the way down the chain to include jobs at the local level for those people that build quality parts and deliver on time with shorter lead time and lower cost? And so I have great empathy for what you're talking about, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can.
Yes, and General and Secretary, going back to the drone attack in Ukraine, a country that was invaded by the Russian dictatorship, starting in 2014. They've been at war for a decade, more than a decade. What they've done with drones is astounding. It's going to change warfare. One of my questions is, what are you doing to establish relations with Ukraine and not turn your back on them as an administration and help them win, help liberty win? This has implications way beyond the boundaries of Ukraine. Russia's got 11 time zones. I mean, this is the most important test of liberty for our NATO alliance in my lifetime, and we better help win. And that involves moving forward faster on drone technology. I'm very worried about our air bases where we have secure assets. Mr. Secretary, can we defend them today if they were to have a similar attack?
We're certainly very focused on that, ma'am. And we're learning every day from Ukraine. I think we would need to clarify what win means. This president is committed to peace. He's committed to stopping the killing. And he was not in office when it started in 2014. There were no additional incursions in his first term. And then under the previous administration, Vladimir Putin sought to take Ukraine. We're committed. This administration's committed to peace, to stopping the killing, and we think that serves
Did you just
American
leave
interests.
Ukraine, Mr. Secretary? Did you just leave Ukraine?
Gentlelady's time has expired, but if you can get
I did
back
not leave
to
Ukraine.
us on that.
No,
that
Have
would
you
be great.
visited Ukraine?
No, ma'am.
My first trip
No.
there, sir, was 1973. I yield
Time
back.
has expired. Mr. Carter, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
For your service to our country. We're very proud of you. I'm fully supportive of the Army's outgoing modernization efforts and the recent Army Transformation Initiative that combined the Army's Future Command with TRADOC to become the Transformational and Training Command. How are you both going to create a partnership between the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, and this new command to ensure the acquisition authorities are modernized and synchronized to achieve the maximum lethality and deterrence.
I'll take that. Maybe I'll hand it to you, Mr. Chairman, as well. We are very encouraged and supportive of the Army's transformation initiative. General George has been critical to that, as has the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll. And together, it's been a heck of a partnership and a willingness to get at the core issues facing today's Army and ensuring it is reformed and modernized to meet the threats of the future. One of those aspects is merging those commands. And I can tell you, whether it's the warrior ethos or lethality, that is central to why we make decisions, ensuring that we're not making decisions on behalf of bureaucrats or process, but to ensure we're getting the most lethal aspects of what we do front and forward as quickly as possible. And that involves things like Futures Command and TRADOC. And when you merge those things, you have to make sure you're getting rid of things that are redundant and pushing forward things that matter the most. But I'll defer to the chairman.
Well, I've shared that commitment completely, and I share this transformation. What do you see as the fundamental capabilities of this command must develop to ensure that we have the lethality and deterrence necessary to succeed in Indo-PACOM? That's where the
Sure.
future is.
Sir, I'll first echo the Secretary's respect and appreciation for Secretary Driscoll and General George. They are a team, and that's always great to see from a warfighter's perspective when you have such a nested combat pair, if you will, that are driving at the same set of objectives. I think there's clarity, Congressman, in the minds of both the Secretary and the Chief on the need for things like long-range fires in the Pacific. And in order to pay for those, they're making those difficult decisions down the Army Transformation Initiative in order to pay for them.
Well, when we started talking about the Futures Command, one of the things that I was hoping we would do is we would not get a project stacked up on somebody's desk and stacked that high, and when he got down to checking on that, oh, that goes to you, and it goes on top of another, on the bottom of another stack that high. And so we get delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed in certain areas of bureaucracy. I think that is dangerous for our country as we look forward in Indo-PACOM.
Yes,
and that's
sir.
why I asked the question. Another issue that's very important, the department has historically relied on outdated production techniques of energetic manufacturing, which may have remained unchanged since the Second World War. How is the department ensuring that investment in next generation energetics manufacturing, such as AI, machine learning capabilities, and enabling and assurance of quality assurance, robotic-driven load, assembly, and pack, and automated formation processes, a prioritize and transition out research and development that is capable of producing these pathways. In other words, a modern way to load and turn out ammunition in the simplest terms.
We're robustly funding things like DIU, like SCO, like the Office of Strategic Capital, to ensure that commercially available options, other companies are able to compete that traditionally are not involved in procurement at the Defense Department, so that the valley of death is eliminated, and you're able to bring in actual competition and dynamic solutions. Otherwise, ammunition's a great example. It's very antiquated in many cases. We're still making rounds the way we made them after World War II. You have to project out what you want to make, send that signal to industry, and then allow innovators to enter that space so they can bring new technology and rapidly field those new technologies. Otherwise, you're stuck doing it the same way you've always done it.
Sir, I was going to add something, but I'll hold off if you're going to roll.
If you can get a written response to the
Yes, sir.
gentleman from Texas on that. That's a concern to all of ours, is to modernize our manufacturing capability for we can get back manufacturing to the United States. Well, Mr. Cuellar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, and all three of you are welcome, and thank you for your service. I represent an area from San Antonio all the way to Laredo, the border. In San Antonio, we got Joint Base San Antonio, the largest joint base in the Department of Defense that contributes over $151 billion to the Texas economy. We support 266 mission partners. San Antonio also has the second largest cyber footprint in the nation, hosting the 16th Air Force cyber. And then, of course, the military facilities that are the best in the country also. Along with that, going down to Laredo, the largest port in the country, 9th largest in the world after 8 Chinese ports. Number 9 in the world is Laredo. And my question, Mr. Secretary, has to do with one of your plans, and ask you to, welcome you to San Antonio, let the San Antonio folks come in. It has to do with Army, U.S. Army North and U.S. Army South. I'm not going to go with their missions or critical mission, but what concerns us in San Antonio, both the Democrats and Republican members of Congress and senators, we're concerned that, in setting up a Western Hemisphere Command, which I think it's a good idea, that you move it away from a place like San Antonio, where we have the infrastructure, the personnel, the community partnerships to work with you on this. And I say this because I think your testimony has about 11,900 troops that are down there working with the Homeland, which I support. And keeping in mind what's happening with the cartels in Mexico and other places, I would ask you to, when you look at this Western Hemisphere Command, that you don't move it 1,500 miles away from the border, especially in a place like San Antonio. I think we got a few Texans here that can talk about the rest of the state of Texas, and some wannabe Texans also that can talk about what the facilities we have. But I would ask you to, as you consider this, to keep the command, Western Hemisphere Command in San Antonio.
Well, sir, count me amongst some of the wannabe Texans. Tennessee's close enough.
Hey, we got no state income tax. Keep that.
It's true. I appreciate that concern. It is something that has come up multiple times in conversations with Secretary Driscoll and General George in reviewing their Army modernization plan and consolidation, with the recognition that some of those changes, when we go through a posture review and as we're looking at commands, are going to include some tough choices. Some of that includes ranks and positioning, but you still are going to have, at some level, a south and north bifurcation. The question is where that is headquartered, and we are in an ongoing review on that, of exactly where that will shake out. But I would encourage continue deliberation with Secretary Driscoll. They have been thoughtful about it and will continue to be.
And I understand that there's decisions that have to be made, efficiencies and all that, but just ask you, as you look at that, if we're doing so much investment on the border,
yeah,
we already got the infrastructure down there in San Antonio and all the support from the other military bases across the state of Texas and the partnership, I would ask you and the Secretary to, to please, before you make a decision, go drink the water, go, feel what we have in San Antonio and the surrounding areas in Texas, to consider that instead of just making a decision by the paper on that. And certainly ask you to consider also the second largest footprint that we have at cyber there in San Antonio, and working with a top cyber university, UTSA there. And of course, the military facilities that we have, which are in the best. And certainly during the Afghanistan and Iraq war, that area was looked. So I just ask that before any decisions were made, consider making a trip to San Antonio and have your folks understand that. I know some of y'all have been in Texas before, and would ask you to look at that. So with that, Mr. Secretary, and all of y'all, thank you for your service.
Well, noted, sir, and thank you for your contributions to securing the border, which has been a huge priority for President Trump. We're going to get 100% operational control, and it's because of support from folks like you. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Chairman Womack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my thanks to the to our witnesses here today. Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of this committee for your service to our nation. Obviously, we face a number of challenges and pacing threats across the globe in all domains, and we have to ensure that the joint force is ready to fight and win our nation's wars. So let me begin with General Kane. What risks do the recent force structure changes or proposals in the Army and Marine Corps present to the joint force, given your global force integration responsibility? Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yes, sir. And I'll be mindful of the environment that we're in and speak broadly, and thank you for the question. You know, we are having to make some difficult choices to pivot some of the combat capability that we have now to the combat capability that we need in the future. Both services, alongside the Department of the Navy and the Department of the Army, are making those changes in order to provide us with the combat capability and capacity that we need at scale to create the dilemmas that we have to deliver for the joint force and our adversaries. So at this point, you know, we're doing the right pivots, Congressman, to make sure that we have the right depth that we need.
Secretary Hegseth, both of you understand the unique value proposition that the National Guard provides the joint force, having served. And gosh, for a long time, it was just me and Hal Rogers up here as the Guard guys. So it's good to have some company. As we're looking to be efficient with federal dollars, I always kind of believe that the Guard and the reserve component structure in general brought what I called value to the force. That I realize it's probably not at the same level of proficiency that the active duty counterparts might have, but they bring value to the force. And when we need to surge responsibly and quickly, then the Guard and Reserve are certainly at the ready to do that. My question is pretty simple. Can you both commit to ensuring that the National Guard component is resourced and equipped properly to meet not only today's operational demands, but those in the future? And I ask this question having had experience back in the day when the National Guard was more or less a reserve force, and it was only after 9/11 that we began to use the National Guard in a truly operational form. And I thought it did a lot of great things for the Guard. I thought it brought value to the force, and I worry sometimes that we may, you know, pivot back to the time when the National Guard is relegated to more of a reserve structure rather than able to surge with our forces in a moment's need and be able to deliver combat capability and combat service support capability when needed. Can you speak to that, Secretary?
Sir, I think it's an excellent point. It does, the National Guard and Reserves bring great value, not to mention the civilian skills, the additive civilian skills that they bring. Completely recognize the shift that happened after 9/11. I was a part of that, as were many people in the Guard of our generation. I think we're entering an even another phase, especially under President Trump with his focus on the homeland, where the National Guard and Reserves become a critical component of how we secure that homeland and apply those civilian sets across the spectrum. So when you're looking at, say, the Army, for example, what we need in the active Army vis-a-vis the National Guard will not be a reflection of what we need or don't need. It will be a right sizing of where that particular application would be best used. And the National Guard is a huge component of how we see the future, sir.
General Kane.
Sir, you know, the policy makers tell us what size our force should be. What I will commit to you, and by the way, thank you both for your service in the Guard. As a fellow Guardsman, you're legendary in those hallways. What I will commit to you is that I'll make sure that the voice of the Guard is heard at the policy level, pursuant to my job as a chairman.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Case.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Secretary, At the Shangri-La Dialogue, in your speech of May 31st, you stated, and I quote, "Here in the Indo-Pacific, our futures are bound together. The prosperity and security of the Indo-Pacific are linked to those of your people." You went on to talk about the benefits from the, quote, "peace and stability that comes with a lasting and strong American presence here in the Indo-Pacific," end quote. Do you believe that the only way to achieve our contributions to peace and security and stability in the Indo-Pacific is through military strength alone?
Sir, certainly not through military strength alone, although military strength is the business that we're in. So we're building partnerships across mill to mill, whether it's the Philippines, Japan, Australia, more actively than any other part of the world, because the application of American strength is not America alone. It's by, with, and through partners who share mutual objectives. And so
Okay,
we are
so you-
very invested in military-to-military
So
relationships.
you, as the Secretary of Defense, believe that we need to take a broader approach in the projection of national power, national influence than simply our military. Is that correct?
Well, sir, that's not my job. My job is the military application. So
Yes, but-
others will determine the broader spectrum of that, but it's always useful to have other applications of
Okay.
power as well.
But how others actually do that does impact your job in running our military, right? I mean, your military operations, your military presence, your mill-to-mill relationships that I agree are important, are all going to be impacted by our non-military projection of power, influence, and assistance throughout the Indo-Pacific. Is that correct?
I would just say that from my 2 recent visits to that region, meeting with many of those ministers of defense multiple times, their focus is what capabilities can we share together, interoperability and capabilities that establish deterrence, because the most important message America can still send, and they can still send, is hard power capabilities. What can we project? Where can we project it? As the chairman said, what dilemmas can we create? That's the business that we're in. And so we work with those partners that share common goals, and our militaries are working better together than they ever have, and I think
and I
that helps
appreciate your
support
focus
security.
on the military side. That's obviously directly your job, but I'm asking you to think and comment more broadly on our big picture approach to the world. This administration, for example, has proposed to reduce the State Department by $8.3 billion, the Economic Support Fund, the Development Assistance and Democracy Fund, and the Assistance for Eurasia. This administration has illegally sought to destroy the U.S. Agency for International Development, and in its budget request, reduce it significantly down to close to zero. This administration has proposed to reduce the international narcotics control and law enforcement effort by $1.2 billion. This administration has proposed to eliminate the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or not eliminate it, but reduce it by $1 billion, a significant reduction. One of our principal agencies that assists us with meeting the needs of the Indo-Pacific in the infrastructure area, and what I think you would agree are key strategic countries such as Indonesia, such as Kiribati, such as the Philippines, such as the Solomon Islands. This administration has proposed to reduce international organization contributions by 83%. This administration is not following through on commitments that we made to the freely associated states, all of which are strategically critical to this country, to expand veteran services in those 3 countries, Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. This administration appears to be slow-walking the resurgence and expansion of the Peace Corps throughout the Indo-Pacific. Do you think that that will affect your job in the military space with your relationships with those countries?
No, sir, I would add to that list the elimination of most USAID programs, which I don't hear anything about because a lot of them were wasteful and duplicitous, and I'm glad we got rid of them.
Well, I've had those
and in
conversations
as far as
with those
you mentioned
countries.
international organizations, the 83% reduction, again, I hear nothing about that because
Have
most
you
of those
talked to those
international
countries?
organizations are not serving U.S. interests,
Mr.
and so we shouldn't
Secretary,
be
have you
funding them
talked to
if they're
those
not
countries
serving
about
U.S.
the
interests.
impact?
So I don't hear from our allies problems about that.
Well, I
because
don't think you're talking to the
those
right
were not
people.
part of their calculus
Yeah,
of American
if you
power.
talk to any one of those countries, they'll tell you that they're deeply concerned with the reduction of non-defense dollars, and it will in fact influence our presence and our contribution to your stated goal of peace and stability
I
and
think they
security
respect
in
that
the
we're
Indo-Pacific.
reducing waste on programs that aren't actually affecting
Gentleman,
change
time
on the
has
ground.
expired. Mr. Diaz-Ballard.
Thank you, and to three of you, thank you. Thanks for being here and thanks for your service. Mr. Secretary, I have two questions. First one is, and you mentioned recruitment at the beginning. During the last 4 years, we got used to just hearing how the recruitment was not doing well, and it was just the new reality. And then all of a sudden, that reality has changed. If you can comment on why that reality is, I think a lot of us know, but if you could talk to us a little bit about this new reality, which you don't hear much about in the press, about how that has changed dramatically. Question number one. Question number two is, a number of years ago, Southcom was moved from Panama to South Florida. There's a lot of reasons for that move. It was to get it because it was in close proximity with others like Giada South, Special Operations Command South and Homestead, Joint Task Force Guantanamo, the Joint Task Force Bravo in Honduras, the U.S. Coast Guard 7th District, which is the busiest district in the entire country, but also because in South Florida you have this multicultural, multilingual community, and as you know, Southcom deals with multiple countries, 40 different languages, and so it was not just a cost savings potentially, but it was also made a lot of sense. I believe that continues to be the case. Nothing has changed. If anything, what's changed is that the Western Hemisphere has gotten a lot more dangerous. And obviously we have Iranian influence, Russian influence, Chinese influence. I'm very grateful, Mr. Secretary, and I don't know how much you had to do with that, of the President's change in attitude on no longer appeasing enemies of the United States in the Southern Hemisphere, whether it's Venezuela or Cuba. But again, there goes the importance of having Southcom where it is. And I just would like your thoughts, if you've had an opportunity to look at that, because it was moved from Panama. It just wasn't in South Florida for the heck of it. It was a decision made. It was the right decision. It's proven to be the right decision. So, two questions. If you can answer them, I'd love to hear it.
Well, sir, thank you for the question about recruiting. What changed is a commander-in-chief that America's young people believe in. President Trump was elected in November, inaugurated in January, and at first I called it the Trump bump. But then it became clear that's not enough. This is a tsunami of support amongst young Americans who want to serve under a president who they know has their back, who will fund them properly, who will not use them unnecessarily, and will make sure they are part of deterrence for the country with a focus, first and foremost, on the homeland, then deterring strengths and making sure our allies step up and carry more of the burden. So you've got a historic surge in the Army, the Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, you name it. Americans are responding because the president says a new spirit. And he's right, and you can feel it in the ranks. You go out to formations, you talk to men and women on the border, they believe in what they're doing in securing that southern border. You talk to them across the world, they're enthused about this new administration and its leadership. So it's President Trump, sir. And then as far as Southcom, it is President Trump's focus on our hemisphere has in many ways reinvigorated the mission of Southcom and the recognition of securing American interests, but also pushing back Chinese malign influence. Panama is a great example of that, but across Central and South America. So Southcom is right where it is. We're grateful for the great work that they do. I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with them and their commander, and we work by, with, and through a lot of allies.
Mr. Secretary, I'm a little confused. Are you telling me that the folks that are now voting with their commitment to the country are not upset that they're not able to use different pronouns? Is that not a priority for the folks that are now signing up for our military?
Well, sir, if they wanted to get a woke indoctrination, they could just go to college. Instead, they're joining the military, where we're focused on the basics. We know men are men, women are women, standards will be high, and we're getting rid of the distractions, the ideologies, the politicization that was in our ranks, so that soldiers, men and women, can do their jobs on behalf of the nation. I think that's all that American people, all the people who want to serve want, is that clarity and that support, and President Trump is giving it.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I would also add that I think having you there has made it very clear what the attitude is. And I will tell you, to me, It's really, really refreshing, and I thank you all.
I appreciate
yield
it.
back.
Thank you, sir.
Yields back. Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record an article from the New York Times entitled, "China's Chokehold on This Obscure Mineral Threatens the West Military."
Without objection.
Mr. Secretary, this article that I just referenced outlines how the Department of Defense paid an Australian firm 10 times more than it paid MP Materials, an American firm, to onshore the full ecosystem of rare earth production. MP, the largest U.S. rare earth producer, has invested $1 billion of its own capital since 2020 and employs more than 800 Americans. Yet it was undercut by an Australian firm that never even broke ground in the U.S. MP Materials is ready to install their samarium processing equipment and help the U.S. combat China's export controls. And I want to note that China produces the entire world's supply of this obscure rare earth metal that is used almost entirely in military applications because of its its use in heat resistance magnets. So my question is, in accordance with the administration's America First agenda, do you agree that subsidies should first support U.S. companies already investing, hiring, and paying taxes in the United States? And can I have your support in ensuring that the department critical mineral policies will align with this goal?
Ma'am, it's an excellent question. It's something we have been very focused on. In fact, my deputy secretary, it is his number one, is ensuring that sourcing of critical minerals, whether they're heavy or light rare earths, are sourced reliably in America first, and if not, then amongst allies. I won't reveal or talk about more than that in a setting like this, because we have reserves and we have capabilities, but at the same time, we have to aggressively work. And MP Materials, Mountain Pass, is a great example of a place where we can partner with industry. But what does China do? You know this. China undercuts the market intentionally to try to corner the market, and we have to account for that in the way that, in the things that we support.
So the answer is yes, I can have your
Yes, ma'am.
support. Thank you. I also want to turn now to the collaborative combat aircraft. I represent Las Vegas, Nevada, so we're very excited that the department will base the CCA unit at Creech Air Force Base, which is the center of excellence in uncrewed aircraft systems. And I want to make sure that the department has the resources they need to make this program a success. Last year, the Air Force had to shift $383 million to the CCA program, plussing it up by 60%. Can you assure me that your budget request will fully fund the CCA program this year?
Ma'am, it does fully fund the CCA, and we believe in the collaborative combat aircraft, the loyal wingman concept, this idea that you project power more robustly through autonomous, semi-autonomous systems that that amplify our lethal effect. So yes.
Thank you. Great. Can you give me an update on the first flight and the production decision for Increment 1, and are we on track for the flight? When will it be? And finally, when do you anticipate the production decision this fiscal year? What quantity of aircraft will we procure? How many vendors will you award? And what factors are you considering?
Bryn, feel free to chime in. You're talking about the CCA still,
Yes.
correct? My understanding is later this year on the flight.
know
but
a date?
As far as I don't know the exact date, ma'am, but Bryn, you might know.
Yes, ma'am. We can get back to you on the specific date. It should be this fiscal year. And for our budget request, it's $804 million for the collaborative combat aircraft.
Great. Thank you. How much time do I have left? I'll just, also, can you then outline what is planned for Increment 2? What type of capabilities can we expect, and what timeline in critical milestones?
We'll get back to you on that one, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you, gentlelady. And I'd just like to point out that Mountain Pass is in San Bernardino County, California. So one of the only critical mineral mines only left in the United States. Hopefully that'll change soon. Mr. Joyce. Nope. Mr. Elzey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant Major Troy Black, thank you for all your years of service. You've been serving this country since Ronald Reagan was president in 1988. You leave behind a distinguished career in uniform, wearing that uniform, service to your country. You have served as the senior enlisted advisor to the Commandant of the Marine Corps and now to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And I think, but what will be most missed, if you didn't know this about him, in 2010, he received the Bronze Star with a Combat V for running across several hundred yards of mine-in-placed fields to pick up a fallen Marine. You're a Marine's Marine. You will be missed. You are the pride of Louisville, Kentucky. And I'd like to say, on behalf of this committee and our nation, we're grateful, and fair winds and following seas. Secretary Hegseth and General Kane and Ms. McDonald, glad you're here. I'm personally grateful for your service to our country and for sharing your valuable time with us today. Raising you, bring a non-traditional perspective to your tenure as chairman, having been a guardsman and an entrepreneur. Thank you for saying yes once again when called to serve, and also distinguished Flying Cross and 2 Bronze Stars. You didn't get that by sitting behind a desk. You were a fighter pilot's fighter pilot. You helped the plan to bring down Scuds in 2003. So thank you for your service. And Mr. Secretary, I want to salute you for your leadership and action-oriented approach at the Pentagon. You've created a sense of urgency that General Kane refers to in his testimony, and back to the issue of what we're not talking about today, and it's recruitment. Because in this family business, all volunteer force of ours, parents and their children who want to serve our country are now no longer afraid to sign up for fear of them being misused or not having their merit being rewarded appropriately. So thank you. You've also highlighted our service academies in that effort. Mr. Womack and I both serve on the boards of visitors at West Point and the Naval Academy, so thank you. I also appreciate your guidance on using commercial solutions in acquisition and on reducing the inflation that we have seen in the numbers of flag and general officers. And I think we can make the Pentagon a triangle pretty quick. There are more Navy admirals in the various systems commands than there are in the fleet. That's too many flags in D.C. and not enough at the waterfront or on the flight line. But speaking of acquisition, I want to turn to the plans of a 6th-generation fighter. General Kane, in his prepared statement, states that the F-47 will continue to ensure U.S. air dominance for decades. I'm a fervent supporter of not only F-47, but whatever the FAXX is going to turn out to be. And I want to make that clear to everyone listening. Our Navy, our Joint Force, and our future combatant commanders need the Navy's 6th-generation fighter, the FAXX. Relying only on the Air Force's 6th-generation fighter does not solve our air superiority challenge, because whether they're coming from Guam or Diego Garcia, the DIMPs are already set and the missiles are already guided. It's a non-moving target. An aircraft carrier moves its DIMPy every 30 seconds. So we can't do either of those with only the Air Force's plan by. So we either want to win or we don't, and I know we want to win. We have to do it with the FAXX. And a 3-year delay is a de facto cancellation and a win for China, and they are watching. And don't take my word for it. They're conducting unrestricted warfare against us right now. And if you read the 36 guidelines from the 6th century, and they talk about how do you defeat an enemy, or Sun Tzu, you defeat them at home with fentanyl, by taking out our military members before they can even join, 70,000 a year. They are being successful in how they're doing unrestricted warfare, and that's exactly what they're conducting. They're also showing us their 6th-generation aircraft right now, and there's at least 3 that we know they're working on. We can't give the field to them and say 5th generation is okay for the Navy, but it's not for the Air Force. We must have both. So several well-informed, well-respected leaders shared with us the importance of having both the Air Force and the Navy 6th-generation fighters, Admiral Paparo, General Alvin, and Admiral Kilby acting CNO. I'm not going to put you all on the spot, but I just want to make it clear. If you'd like to address it, you may. I'm just putting it that it's that important to me. So what troubles me about the Pentagon needing to be a triangle now is that one of my favorite movies is Office Space. Remember Milton? Milton down there with the swing line. We're not really sure what he did, but he sure made a lot of trouble for everybody. I think we have a lot of Miltons in the systems commands and down there in the Pentagon, maybe at Cape, who are telling you that we can't do something when we absolutely can. They need to go. So let's get rid of the Milton. Let's invest in this generational investment. I'd like to thank Chairman Calvert Chairman Calvert for his investment in the FAXX and the bill, and present to this subcommittee later today. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Okay, go Navy. Mr. Morelli, you're recognized.
Thank you, General, Chairman. I'm grateful for your service and grateful, Mr. Chairman, for the hearing today. I don't want to pile on, Mr. Secretary, and I'm brand new to this subcommittee, but I will say that in the same way we wouldn't go into battle without knowing the number of troops, our weaponry, the number of armaments, equipment, supplies. It's really almost impossible for this committee to do its job without details from the President, from the Department on a budget request. So I wonder whether or not we could get a commitment from all of you to come back before the committee when the full, the President's budget request has been delivered, so you can answer questions in detail about it.
Certainly, we'll make sure you get those details, Congressman.
Well, getting the details is important, but also being able to answer questions about those details and what they mean, I think would be helpful. So obviously, you know, this is the chairman's decision, but I would ask you to consider coming back before the committee when the President's budget request is submitted to us, so we could get your sense of the various items in it. I want to go back to a topic I think Ms. Capter raised, which is Ukraine, and I really appreciate your comment that when you referred to partners on our side like Ukraine, so I'm glad we still consider them partners on our side. Last week, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group met in Brussels. I know we did not attend, you did not attend, and I don't believe you appeared even remotely, but that was a meeting in which allies coordinated billions in aid to help Ukraine. We're talking about funding right now without a budget, without a plan to sustain U.S. support in what I consider the most serious conflict in Europe in a generation. So can you at least give us a sense, Mr. Secretary, of the presidential drawdown aid authorized through January 20th? Do you know how much has actually been delivered? Just the presidential authority that was given through January 20th when the new administration took over. Okay, and do you have a sense of the how much has actually been delivered?
I don't know the exact amount that has been delivered, but we're actively monitoring it as well as the lifespan of certain munitions, what munitions remain critical for us, critical for them, critical for allies like Israel. We're paying very close attention to it.
Okay, and you can give us a detailed, thank you. Do you know whether the department or the president is prepared to ask for funding for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, and at what level?
It is a reduction in this budget. As you know, this administration takes a very different view of that conflict. We believe a negotiated peaceful settlement is in the best interest of both parties and our nation's interests, especially with all the competing interests around the globe. I don't think the word victory has been well defined or the path to it. And as a result, a path to peace that stops the killing and the carnage is something that President Trump is very invested in.
Well, look, I would certainly, I think I would define victory as making sure incursions, illegal incursions by the Russian Federation into Ukraine, which is a sovereign nation, would be a victory, but I'll leave that aside. I want to just touch briefly on, with the limited time I have, the President's announced $175 billion Golden Dome. It's been talked about. I know that what has been talked about, we understand that reconciliation includes a $25 billion down payment. We haven't really received much in clarity on the specifics. Can you tell me what the $25 billion will be used for?
Excuse me. There are many specifics that are not fitting for this setting. We're happy to get you at the appropriate level the specifics you request. But what we've done is we've built out the entire understanding of what the architecture would look like, ensuring it includes existing capabilities that can be fielded rapidly. As President Trump has made the case, we need this now, not conceptually in the future. You know, we had SDI under Ronald Reagan, which was a concept. We've fast forward to the ability to deliver these things, and the American people deserve that kind of protection. So multiple layers for multiple different types of threats, coordinated with sensors, both on the ground and in space at other layers. And we've got one of our best Space Force generals fully focused on that project in General Gutlein, who has a background in understanding those types of architectures. So we've pulled the program up to the Office of Secretary of Defense to make sure it's monitored on a monthly,
Can you tell us what the
even more regular
appropriations
basis.
request will be for Golden Dome in the 26 fiscal year?
Well, the gentleman,
Go ahead, Brent.
Bren, excuse me, Ms. McDonald, you can get back to us on that and for the record, and we would appreciate that. Mr. Fleischman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Want to welcome Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, and Mrs. McDonald. Thank you. This has been an outstanding hearing. Let me just say this. The world is a dangerous place. The nation is a dangerous place. Heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you officers stepping up and for doing an exemplary job. Thank you so much. As most of you know, I represent the 3rd District of Tennessee. That's the Great Oak Ridge Reservation, birthplace of the Manhattan Project. In addition to serving on this prestigious subcommittee, I'm the chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, which has the NNSA. I'm deeply involved in the recapitalization and modernization of our nation's nuclear deterrent. It will come as no surprise I have concerns about both our progress and posture. Our progress is a concern as we are recapitalizing the entire nuclear deterrent all at once. Meanwhile, Russia has recapitalized its triad minus some bombers, and China is rapidly expanding its numbers and fielding a triad. Of course, there's also North Korea and the looming prospect of a nuclear Iran. As we focus more on the Pacific, our post-Cold War posture is a concern due to the lack of in-theater non-strategic nuclear weapons. This creates a deeply worrying capability gap in the most critical theater. I'll ask my questions and ask for your answers in. First, Secretary Hegseth, given this troubling strategic threat picture, what is your outlook on the current pace and scope of nuclear recapitalization? And then, General Kane, what are your ideas to fill this non-strategic nuclear capability gap in the Pacific? Are there any ways Congress can better support the department's efforts to meet these increasingly tight deadlines? And I'll listen to your responses. Thank you.
Sir, thank you. First, if I would just take liberty, both the chairman and I have taken up almost all the oxygen from Bryn McDonald here. I would just take issue with the characterization that we have not delivered a budget and we don't have details and we're not delivering on it. She and her team have done a fantastic job of working as rapidly and as detailed as possible to deliver what we feel very confidently is a robust, detailed delivery of the president's agenda for FY26. So, Bryn, thank you for the work that you're doing and all the details and focus on that have come through. And that the nuclear triad is certainly a part of it. NC3, every single aspect of that. Sentinel with the Nunn-McCurdy breach has to, we are taking a very hard look at that while fully funding it. Columbia class, critical. B-21, which for the most part has been a success story, but needs to be continually monitored as any major platform does. And then the SLICM-N as well, investing in that capability, considering the advantages we have on the submarine side. So we are fully funding, in fact, even more so in most cases, that capitalization and modernization, which we have to, considering what our adversaries are up to.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, I just echo the Secretary's comments about non-strategic nuclear weapons, SLICM and the others. And I think it really, for me, centers around 4 C's that we got to do across the enterprise. Change the culture to get after it faster. That's the first one. We got to create competition across the continuum in the defense and national industrial base. We need to buy better contracts and get greater capacity. So no ads other than that, Congressman.
Thank you. So if I may, you all feel reasonably comfortable with the way that we're modernizing our triad?
Well, sir, I'm not comfortable with the way the Sentinel upgrade had been happening.
Understood.
With the recognition that it is behind and can't be. And so we're getting at dynamic ways to address that. Different alternatives. Our Deputy Secretary and his team very focused along with Bryn. What do we fund? Why do we fund it? How do we look at new ways to do it? Because the way we've approached it so far has gotten us nowhere fast.
Thank you. By the way, I welcome you all to visit Oak Ridge at any time. Thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Chairman General Calvert.
That's right.
Thanks to the witnesses for being here.
Yes, okay, Private, go ahead.
The clock's still moving, Mr. Secretary, I want to express my severe concern with the deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles without consultation of the state of California. There have been photographs that have shown these troops sleeping on the floor and have not been provided fuel, food, or water by DoD. How long will this deployment last, and why were we unprepared to provide them basic necessities such as food and water?
The commanders and troops on the field are very well prepared, sir. They responded incredibly rapidly to a deteriorating situation with equipment and capabilities. We have made sure from the top down, as the Secretary of Defense who's been in a unit holding riot shields outside the White House during the chaos of the summer of 2020. I know what it's like to be immediately deployed into a situation like that. There are moments where you make do as best you can temporarily, but we are ensuring they're housed, fed, water capabilities in real time from my office, because I care that much about the California Guard and the Marines and the men and women who are supporting our ICE agents on the ground.
You should check
It's
with your
true
office.
every day, and that's a disingenuous attack that
Deployment last?
misrepresents how much we care about our troops
How
and
long
what
will
they're
the
doing to
deployment
defend ICE agents. I'm not going to take the fact that we don't care about the troops. Nobody cares more about the troops at the top than this Secretary and the
Mr.
Chairman
Secretary,
and our
how long will
department.
the deployment last?
We stated very publicly that it's 60 days, because we want to ensure that those rioters, looters, and thugs on the other side assaulting our police officers
What is the
know that we're not
estimated
going
cost?
anywhere.
What
We're
is the
here to
estimated-
maintain the peace on behalf of law enforcement
Secretary,
officers in Los Angeles,
appreciate
which
you
Gavin
answering the
Newsom
question.
won't do.
What is the estimated cost of the deployment for the Guard and the Marines to LA, and where's this funding coming from? Will it be coming from quality of life programs that affect our service members or our families? If you want to wait till I finish.
Before
my
I hand it to-
question,
before I-
such as updates, housing and barracks.
Before I hand it to Bryn, the insinuation that we're pulling money from housing and barracks in order to fund this is disingenuous and incorrect.
I'm just asking.
Bryn can give you the numbers, absolutely.
So the current estimated cost is $134 million, which is largely just TDY costs, travel, housing, food, et cetera.
Where's it coming from? That's the cost, but where's it coming from?
Out of their O&M accounts.
With the most recent deployment of the Marines, Mr. Secretary, what's the justification for using the military for civilian law enforcement purposes in LA? Why are you sending war fighters to cities to interact with civilians?
Every American citizen deserves to live in a community that's safe, and ICE agents need to be able to do their job. They're being attacked for doing their job, which is deporting illegal criminals. That should happen in any city, Minneapolis or Los Angeles. And if they're attacked, that's lawless, and President Trump believes in law and order. So he has every authority, and he has done mobilizing National Guard or active duty troops under U.S. code to protect federal agents in their job, which is exactly what we're doing, and we're proud to do it. We're proud to do it.
10 U.S.C. of the U.S. Code 12406 as a legal basis that the President used cites 3 examples and circumstances for the Guard: invasion by a foreign nation, rebellion or dangerous rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the President is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Which authority is triggered here to justify the use?
I don't know. You just read it yourself, and people can listen themselves, but it sounds like all 3 to me. If you've got millions of illegals and you don't know where they're coming from, they're waving flags from foreign countries and assaulting police officers and law enforcement officers, that's the problem.
The laws of the United States?
No, the governor of California is unable to execute the laws of the United States.
The President, you said all 3
governor
apply.
of the California has failed to protect his people, along with the mayor of Los Angeles, and so President Trump has said he will protect our agents, and our Guard and Marines are proud to do it.
The law also says, Mr. Secretary, that the orders for these purposes shall be issued through governors of the states.
You and I both know that President Trump has all the authorities necessary, and thankfully he's willing to do it on behalf of the citizens of Los Angeles, on behalf of our ICE agents, and behalf of our country.
We've also pulled $1 billion for the border as well, so this just goes into the same fund, 134. What did
Congressman,
you
what's
indicate, 134 million? I was asking Ms. McDonald.
Okay.
134 million goes on top of the billion that's been pulled for the
So
border.
the funding that was pulled for this year was largely in FSRM, and in this budget, we're actually looking to plus that funding back up to backfill that for our troops and for their families.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Valadeo.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, General. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for being here. I know a lot of things have been asked already, and since I'm the bottom of the totem pole on seniority here, all my questions get asked first, so I'll hit one that's a little closer to home for me. Secretary Hegseth, thank you for addressing the challenges military families have faced under the Global Households Good contract. I've heard directly from my constituents about these issues, so I appreciate your I've heard directly from my constituents, so I appreciate your directive to review the contract and raise rates during peak PCS season. Can you commit to continuing to work with us to monitor the impact and make further improvements as needed?
Sir, I appreciate the question. We heard as well the worsening PCS change of station process that military members are facing, that the new attempt to reform it had failed, and we got that word quickly. And when we did that, we didn't try to excuse it away or cover it up. We immediately confronted the process. We fired the person in charge, and we said, we're going to, in this peak season, plus up the amount we reimburse so that families are reimbursed properly. And we use both systems, the legacy system and the new system, to ensure their needs are actually met. At the end of that process, we will then do a thorough reform of how it actually happens. It hasn't worked for far too long. Everybody knows it. It's about time we take a look at the process. I mean, think about the things we can deliver in real time to people in far-flung places across the country and across the world. And you can't reliably move an E4 from California to New York and ensure that the goods get there within a week. That's a failure of the United States military, and we're going to fix it.
I appreciate that. Next question, Secretary Hegseth. With rising tensions involving Russia and China, what steps is the department taking to ensure our defense industrial base can meet surge demands across multiple theaters? Are we seeing adequate investments in munition stockpiles, logistics, and supply chain resilience, in particular when it comes to critical inputs like rare earths and other essential minerals?
I would just echo exactly what you said. It's because of the urgency of the moment, the reality of the threats we face, the threats that are joining forces in a sort of an anti-American, anti-Western bloc, are developing capabilities that they're fielding and trying in other theaters to refine them. The munitions that we have, where we use them, how we procure them, and what we use them for, the supply chain that goes into the materials on those munitions. Unfortunately, we inherited a department that didn't pay enough attention to that seemed to think sourcing from adversaries was going to be okay in a time of contingency or crisis. We are changing that. Or content to make the same munitions we've had in the past because, well, they were made in somebody's district or they were made in somebody's state, and that's the way we always do it. We're not doing that anymore. We're making the tough calls based on the threats we face, matching it to the capabilities, and I'm happy to sit in front of every and any committee and explain why we're doing it, because it's about time. It's about time we challenge that, and that doesn't mean we don't want input. We do want input. We know why people are invested in certain programs and certain systems, but it's our job to make the tough calls, and President Trump has asked us to do that. I'm willing to make the tough calls, whether it's on personnel, systems, platforms, modernization, and partner with folks like General Kane and the Joint Staff who've been with us in every step of the way.
I appreciate that. So we got a little more time. So Secretary Hegseth, as the department looks to stay ahead of near-peer threats, will the defense budget continue to invest in hypersonic weapons and defense systems, including unmanned, high Mach, and next-gen aviation technologies?
The answer is yes. In a way, unfortunately, the previous administration did not. So if you're looking at long-range fires, autonomous systems, hypersonics are part of warfare of the long-range drones, a part of the warfare of the future. That means we're investing in them to be better than our adversaries. Not accept the fact that we have matching capabilities, but what more can we do to enhance those so we're ahead of the curve? Because when President Trump says we have the best platforms, the best systems, the best fighters, the best ships, the best vehicles, he means it, and we mean business on it, and we're going to deliver it.
All right, thank you. And I've got 30 seconds. So General Kane, if Congress had $1 extra to invest today most effectively to strengthen our deterrence posture against China, Russia, and threats in the Middle East, where should it go? 20 seconds.
Wow, I'm gonna take 19 of those, Congressman. Probably in munitions. I don't know how much we'd buy for $1, but I'd want to make sure that the joint force is properly armed at scale at the tactical edge, and the youngsters that volunteer to serve have what they need.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Joyce.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, everybody, I appreciate, we had to go out to other, you wouldn't believe this, but there are other hearings taking place. So I went over to bug Secretary Turner and now came back, so it's your turn. Secretary Hegseth, your April 30th memo on Army transportation and acquisition reform directs the Army to expand prepositioned stocks of equipment to the Indo-Pacific. I expect we would need to enhance our industrial base capacity to support this effort. Can you discuss the importance of increasing prepositioned stocks in the Indo-Pacific and how this affects the Army's resources for FY26?
It's a great question because it marries up two things that need to be linked and synced and often aren't, right? The capabilities that we have in the priority theater and where we preposition those capabilities. So my job exists on multiple axes of that. One is working with allies and partners to make sure we have places to preposition them, many of which we can't talk about here today, but in the event of a contingency, we can't be relying on a supply chain that reaches all the way back to the States or even to Hawaii or even to Guam. You need to recognize the prepositioning of stocks. But then you have to have those stocks, and they have to be the relevant ones for the systems that you're deploying, and you need a defense industrial base to deliver on that, which is why we've made historic investments in munitions, focusing on priority munitions that would be applied in our priority theater, with a recognition that every munition we spend somewhere else, and I say that as someone who, very proudly, we conducted a very successful freedom of navigation campaign against the Houthis to ensure that our ships don't, and by the way, 2 of our ships transited the BAM successfully, and the ceasefire held very recently. So doesn't mean you don't expend munitions, you judiciously expend them with an understanding that you have to safeguard others for future fights and prepositioning, and then invest in your industrial base. And I think that's why you see a budget with a 13% increase. 13% increase in a defense budget is significant and allows us to both invest in the president's priorities and fast-track munitions that we're going to need.
For a guy chairing a committee that has to cut his by 57%, I can tell you getting a plus 13 is a lucky day. Chairman Kane, our forces face growing challenges sustaining operations across contested environments, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. China is investing in capabilities designed to disrupt supply lines, access to forward operating bases, and target critical logistic nodes. What steps are you taking to strengthen contested logistics capabilities, and what investments can Congress make to ensure that you have operational resilience?
Well, Congressman, thanks for the question. You know, history tells us that the professionals talk about logistics, and that's what was the big differentiator between us and our adversaries in World War II, is really the logistics power. You know, our teammates within the Joint Force are looking carefully at this right now, and as we look at the adversaries' threat arrays that they have and our ability to defeat them and move the combat capacity that we need to through those difficult places is a key part of that. I don't have a specific number for you, but what I'll commit is, as we think through what contested logistics looks like, as we think through what forward supply points on the first and second island chain might look like, we'll stay close with the committee to make sure that we're communicating early, often, and always about what our needs are.
I certainly appreciate that, and I throw out that having a small Air Force Reserve airport in Youngstown, Ohio area.
Some great C-130Js up there,
Thank you.
Congressman. Yeah.
Appreciate the help on our fire department for the new inventory we got. But the old stuff we had there, you had maybe 8 planes, you were cannibalizing 3 to feed the 5 because we didn't have a parts and storage and those type of things. And I think that's has played out in other areas for us as well. And we need to not only make sure we have the manufacturing industrial base, but we also have the ability to have the parts and inventory on to keep all those things online, or we have to remove them from service.
Yes, sir. I know General Alvin and the team at the Air Force is looking hard at that too, to make sure that we've got the right stuff on the shelf, prior to that we need, not just in the C-130 community, but the other airframes within the Air Force, and frankly, the Joint Force. Parts are always going to be a driver, and I'm really encouraged by the innovation that's happening to look at things like additive manufacturing, where we get a hold of the specs from companies like Lockheed and others and can just 3D print right on the spot of the requirement.
Those have to be in any procurement you do from now on. That you
Yes,
also
sir.
get
I
access
think
to all
so,
this
sir. It's, you know, the force of the future will fix on the spot, so they'll need to be able to have the parts right there. And as we look at mission command and delegating authorities and responsibilities to our younger commanders and you know, complex command and control problems, part of that is going to be the ability to sustain our force out there at the edge.
Thank you very much, General.
Yes, sir.
I yield
Thank you.
back.
And thinking of logistics, it made me think at, what was it, General Marshall, who went out in the 30s and met with a young lieutenant colonel, and said it's the best logistics officer I've ever met. And that was General Eisenhower. 3 years later, he was a 4-star general. So wars, logistics are important. Mr. Anderholt, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks everyone for being here today, this morning. And as we wrap up the hearing today, let me say the Golden Dome Initiative represents, in my opinion, a substantial investment in our national security, and I credit this administration in pursuing this bold project, and I share your ambition for it. So thank you for moving forward on that. I want to follow up with from my colleague from New York. The President has said that he has chosen an option that will total $175 billion. Can you confirm that number, and when do you hope to make this system of systems operational?
I'll confirm it, but our belief is that 175 is the totality, that this is the initial investment, but that a lot of the investment will eventually be in systems, some of which are already in production. We'll need to ramp up the production of them because the President has charged us with having this mission capable by the end of his term. So this is not something that's futuristic. This is not something that will happen in some distant future based on some technology we don't yet have or can't field. Our approach to Golden Dome will be making sure we can procure existing layers that can talk to each other with new layers on top, because this is a layered system, as was mentioned, to include drones as well in partnership with the services. So can you confirm that, Bryn?
Yes, sir. Nothing to add. That's all accurate. And we're still planning towards what the final number is, but the $24.8 billion we're requesting this year is that down payment on the near-term capabilities that we're looking at as part of the architecture.
Okay, thank you. Let me switch over, and I'd like to get your thoughts on AUKUS partnership. Not merely as a cornerstone for our Indo-Pacific defense strategy, but also as an opportunity for our defense industrial base. In fact, we've heard from a lot of Australian and UK businesses who are ready, willing, and able to move production to the U.S. given the new regulatory framework under Pillar 2. Britain and Australia set the standard for defense cooperation, bringing real capability and firepower to the fight. Can you preview how this administration intends to fund Pillar 2 efforts to develop and field joint capabilities between all three partners?
It's a great question, sir. I've spent a great deal of time with both Minister of Defense Marles from Australia, as well as Secretary of Defense Healy from the UK, to really get our arms around what would be mutually beneficial in this trilateral arrangement. So there's the recognition with Australia in Pillar 1 that they're investing in our defense industrial base. We want to provide them capabilities. We want to make sure those capabilities are part of how they use them with submarines, but also how they integrate with us as allies. In Pillar 2, we don't want to rely just on the architecture of the previous administration. We're looking at sort of the opportunity for a signature program or programs we can work on together that benefit all three, that create processes or procurement opportunities of systems we need for future fights. And we've had, in fact, as recently as last week, I spoke with Secretary Healy about that, and we're looking for those 1 or 2 signature programs. We've got a menu of options. We're at the point where we'll get to right-sizing it and determining it.
And you feel at this point that things are on track And you're...
That's what we're monitoring, especially in Pillar 1, sir, to make sure that expectations are properly set so that we're not missing deadlines or expectations are shifted in the wrong direction. So we're having honest conversations with our allies like we should, with a recognition that by investing in each other in that defense industrial base, we can have a multiplying effect.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. McCollum, any closing statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to Mr. Aguilar's question, and Ms. McDonald, you were helping to fill in the blanks. The money's coming from FSRM, and that's about a 25% cut to that budget to fill on what's happening on the border and now what's happening in Los Angeles. If you could get us the details of what's not going to happen in that account because of that, that would be fabulous. We might want to look and see if we prioritize things in next year's budget to make sure that they're covered. Mr. Secretary, the top line on the budget before us is $830 billion. It is not $901 billion. It's just not. That's the number we have to work with. You can talk about an increase. You've got a lot of things baked in. Hopefully that goes in reconciliation, $6 billion for revitalizing shipyards, 3.5 for F-47s, 25 for Golden Dome, but that's all in reconciliation. And we can't include that in any of our planning. And that's why we are so concerned about getting the money outbreaks in front of this committee. And I'll give you an example. The Navy, their J-books, where they break everything down, I know you're really familiar with them. We had 30 of them in front of us when we were getting ready to do our appropriation last time. We have 0 in front of us this time. So, Mr. Secretary, I believe, honestly believe you want to provide the information, but time is of the essence because this committee wants to do its best work together, both Democrats and Republicans, to make sure the women who serve in our armed forces have the equipment that they need to do the missions that they're assigned to and come home safely because we honor their service and their commitment. Get us the information. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
I thank the gentlelady, and I just make, that's where we're going to agree that we need some more detailed information. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go upstairs here and do the subcommittee mark, but then we're later this week we're going to do the full committee mark on this bill. The Senate is pushing off doing their appropriation bills in general until after reconciliation passes because they want to incorporate that. But we don't have the luxury of time. We'll just have to work out the differences we have in conference. But it's hard for us to do our job without the J-books, without the detailed information, and I know you know that. And so you might talk to your friends at OMB, and if OMB has any friends, I don't know if they do, but and see if they can get this going for us because it'll be very helpful. With that, Mr. Secretary, thank you. Chairman, thank you. And Ms. McDonald, thank you. We appreciate all of you being here today. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, General.